Oh,
Good afternoon. It's Sue Ellam here of Soulfully Connecting, and today I've got the great pleasure of interviewing Jocelyn Chaplin. Now, Jocelyn is the founder of the Serpent Institute. She's a psychotherapist, or she calls herself a soul healer, and she is particularly interested in planetary transformation. So, hi, Jocelyn. Very pleased to meet you today.
hi, Sue. It's great to be here with you.
Good. All right. My first question is, who are you? Who's Jocelyn Chaplin?
Ah, that's a really difficult question to answer because when people ask me that normally, immediately my ego pops up and I think, what labels should I be attaching to that name? The name that's been given to me as Jocelyn Chaplin this lifetime. Of course, I like to think of myself also as being a spark of the divine light, a drop in the divine ocean. But this lifetime, that name has resonated with my being on this earth at this time. So one of the labels that you've already mentioned is psychotherapist, and lots of ego can be attached to that, and then feminist and artist and various other things like an anarchist, a socialist, because I've also got quite a strong political side of me. And in a way, none of those labels really quite say enough, or they say too much. So I'm both less than and more than all of those. Perhaps in relation to this interview, I like to think of myself as a soul first and foremost, sort of journeying through all the different dimensions, through different lifetimes, trying to balance up all the opposites within my nature, within humanity. And as you said earlier, I'm particularly interested in the future of humanity and how each of us has a unique place in this massive change that's going on at the moment. And it's like finding out for all of us what our unique place is. So for Jocelyn Chaplin, this lifetime, it seems to be about bringing together progressive politics and spirituality, which in particular makes me the label that I perhaps would use most often at the moment is that I'm a low priestess of Equalia. Now, Equalia is a long lost, long forgotten, and future goddess who's a kind of personification of the forces in nature that are trying to equalize and balance. And being a priestess could sound very egotistical. So that's why I call myself a low priestess, because I'm simply here to serve her, honor her, attune to her, and not to sort of charge around with lots of amazing clothes, although that can be great fun too, and do sort of really important rituals. It's more an everyday kind of honoring and attunement.
Isn't it interesting what you say about labels? Because people just jump to their own assumption of what a label means. I mean,
Mm.
a social, when you talk about a kind of priestess, some people will think, oh, she thinks she's so important, and other people will think, oh, I understand that it's all about
Mm.
the goddess and the goddess coming into into power, and so it really, with labels, it really depends on the person that hears the word and their particular connection or assumption.
Mm.
It takes me back to when I was doing kind of graphology readings at festivals, and this and words and how words mean certain things. And I said to this lady that she was very private, and she took great exception to me saying she was private. And then I explained, and she'd equated the word private with secretive and deceptive. That
Mm.
was her association. with that word, which wasn't what I meant at all. So labels can be very dangerous in the wrong hands.
Oh dear. And you know that wonderful Burns quote, which is, God gie the gift he gie us to see ourselves as others see us. You know, people project, don't they, onto
Yeah,
us.
yeah,
And what the word for one person being private, you thought it would be actually a kind of compliment to her.
yeah,
But actually she took it as being something really negative.
yeah.
And the amount of projection that we all do onto each other all the time is quite mind-boggling, actually.
I know, I
Yeah.
know. Luckily enough, I managed to placate her, but
Oh,
if
good.
she'd been on the end of a phone, she'd probably have put it down.
Yeah.
um, so,
But we
Jocelyn,
can't be walking around all the time being too careful either. You
yeah,
know, I
I think
think about
that,
using the word priestess because I know that's got connotations for people,
yeah,
but hey, that's how I feel at the moment, today.
yeah, we've got to be authentic,
Yeah.
and I think it's when we start tiptoeing around and making sure we don't upset people, we're always going to upset somebody by something we say. I mean, there's no way we can get around that. I mean, I fully accept that some people will like me and some people probably won't because I'm very opinionated. I will listen, but you know, in some instances, people will just dislike me because I'm a woman from a particular place. I mean, you never know. You cannot. I
No.
think what I try to do is make sure that I can look at myself in the mirror and know that I haven't willingly or knowingly hurt anybody that
Yeah.
particular day. And I
Yeah.
think if I've upset people, then they need to come and say, okay, I didn't agree with that, or I upset you, and then we can talk it through.
Yeah.
And I'll apologize if I need to,
Mm,
if
mm,
I've been insensitive to their feelings. But
mm.
I think if we start to be too aware of what other people will think of a label or whatever
Mm,
we equate with who we are this lifetime, as you said, then
mm,
we would douse our light. We would
mm.
be less than we are,
Yeah.
or less than we're meant to be. And then how can anybody, help other people come into their own authenticity if we are too aware that we might tread on somebody's toes by saying we're this or that, or
Mm.
it's a fine line. It's a tightrope,
It,
which
it's a terror.
we're all going to fall off sometime.
Definitely. It's always a balance, isn't it,
Yeah,
between being really authentic and at the same time being empathic with other people. It's
yeah,
the two things
yeah,
kind of need to balance each other. Because obviously in my work, I'm often sitting there with somebody who I'm encouraging to be more authentic and more themselves. And how can I do that unless I'm going to be honestly myself? Which includes opinions.
yeah,
I say to people, well, I've got very strong opinions, but I can listen to you too. You know, I'm interested in what you've got to say. I'm not going to make you believe what I believe,
yeah,
you know, in some kind of forceful way.
yeah. And I think nowadays, because the internet and uh, everything is, there's people who will sit behind computers and there's trolls and there's
Mm,
always going to be somebody who's going to try and rip you to shreds. And some people, they might not know you particularly, but it's their life's work to bring people down.
yeah.
And you can't be sensitive to that. I mean, it's bound to hurt
Mm,
in the beginning, and then I think Brené Brown was saying that you would talk. I've got great admiration for Brené Brown, and she was saying that you've got an audience of people, and there's one or two critics in the audience,
mm,
and you don't
mm.
listen to any or the good stuff. Just listening to what the critic says. And I think you've just got to balance it. You've just got to balance it out and be happy with yourself that's the best thing, I think.
Exactly,
So what do
exactly.
you do on a day-to-day basis, Jocelyn?
Well, I've got sort of like four different things that I do. One of them is writing and blogging about progressive politics and spirituality. And I'm going to actually show you my latest book, if
Good.
that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know whether, can you see
Yeah,
it?
just bring it up a bit, and you need to
Up.
speak. You need to speak while you're showing it.
Right, okay, this book is called Deep Equality, and it's living in the flow of natural rhythms, with the picture at the front showing string theory's understanding of all the different dimensions in and out of each other. There are supposed to be at least 11, maybe 12, maybe many, many more.
Okay.
And it's trying to bring the sort of science of the equalizing rhythms of life into our everyday lives, how we can use our understanding for everyday lives where we can be more authentic.
Yeah. Okay.
And flow, and in the flow it's a lot to do with attuning and being in the flow of all the opposites that balance around us.
Is this one of your own? Jocelyn's a very talented artist. Is this one of your own paintings?
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah,
Ah, okay.
yes.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing I do. I paint. Um,
Yes.
and I'm painting images at the moment. All my images are of Equalia, who I, as I said, see as this force within nature. And I also paint other goddesses and other images that are almost like prayers to kind of bring back that divine energy, that divine feminine energy in particular, though I do paint male gods as well, and very much to do with helping us to balance this terrible imbalance that I feel we've had for 5,000 years at least, of hierarchy and patriarchy, and more recently sort of consumer capitalism, if you like. And basically, I'm trying to help people both individually attune. So that obviously part of my work is as a psychotherapist with individuals. And so that I channel the goddess as I sit and work with them, and I try to help them to dissolve their inner and outer hierarchies, because my belief is that these hierarchical vertical structures within our heads, like you were saying earlier, how people will project onto us that we are, say, lesser than because we're a woman or we belong to this group, or better than because we belong to a particular other group, because of our background, our color, or our sexuality, for one reason or another, and that these harm us. A lot of our psychological problems are because of these inner hierarchies. So I help people individually to dissolve their hierarchies, their different ways of seeing, into ways that are much more fluid, much more rhythmic, much more in the moment, so they can see a person as they are as a person and not immediately judge them as up or down, better or worse than us. And that's about equality, because I believe underneath, in the core of everybody, is a sense of our own equality, our own worth, our own uniqueness, and that we know very deeply within our souls that we are actually equal to others. We aren't really superior or inferior. It's something we're taught as children very early on. And so I'm trying to help people to let go of all those defenses and all those paradigms, if you like, from society, and be in touch with their core. And that's part of what I do. Another thing I do is I run groups and classes on Equalia, talking but sometimes about ancient goddesses, but also very interested in bringing them into the world today, and also looking at the future, because Equalia I see as a future goddess that I see many generations becoming interested in the future. I'm just sowing the seeds. That's my job at the moment, is sowing the seeds of her presence, her return, if you like, her rebirth. I could try and show you a couple of paintings of her. Shall I
Should
share?
we do that at the end so we can?
Let's do that at the end. Yes,
We'll do that at
absolutely.
the end. It'd be a nice finale.
Yes, yes, yes. And just thinking about what else I do. I think I try my own life to be always in touch with her. So as I'm walking along the road, I'm breathing Equalia or sometimes other words. So the breath, which is an in and out, always you've got to breathe in and out or you die very quickly. If you try to hold your breath for too long, it could be a bit problematic. But so that every minute of the day I could be in touch with her. Of course, I'm not. I forget. I get embroiled in all sorts of things. But my aim is to attune, to remember the breath, remember the equalizing rhythm of life, and to come back to the present moment and to myself.
Can I ask you, when you're consciously doing the breath and talking about Equalia and thinking about Equalia, do you notice that other people, their interactions with you are slightly different, a different energy?
Yes, I think very much so. I would say that two or three different things can happen. One is that I have far more synchronicities. When I'm remembering to do this, I bump into people for a start as I'm walking down the street. And it happens a lot more often when I'm more tuned into her. Um, Another thing is that it can sort of calm people down. It calms me down. Um, and so being in that kind of aura, in that space, people do sometimes slow down. And when I'm channeling her with my therapy work, I think people feel, well, I hope they feel the kind of the love that comes through her, because it's like essentially it's a love, a kind of attention, so that I'm almost as if I'm in love with each client I work with. I sort of look at them as the most amazing person in the world as they're sitting in front of me. And even though I'm not saying anything, something's coming through me, which I hope at least some of the time they feel and experience that they are fully accepted as they are, warts and all, with all their anger, with all their fears. And in this space, in this very room I am now, which I sometimes see as a temple to Equalia, but not all clients are going to be interested in looking at it that way. They've got their associations with the word temple. Oh no, oh my goodness, she's going to be one of these pagans who charges around naked in the woods. That sort of association, which might be quite fun sometimes, but
Yeah.
but it's like a sacred space, and I think the act of doing therapy, as sometimes I call it soul healing, is a kind of sacred act, even for people who don't believe in the other dimensions, which very many people don't these days.
Yes, there's the jury's out, isn't it? There seems to
Yeah.
be more and more as we're going through of the yes and the no, and it seems the divisions seem to be getting much clearer, uh, and people that were on the fence are kind of jumping one side or the other. Again, it depends an awful lot on their personal experience, and
Mm,
I mean, I find that quite often people who don't, they get into this victim mentality, don't they?
mm,
And that is a death of a lot of belief in the spirituality, because
mm,
they're assuming they've been abandoned. If things aren't going right in their lives, they're assuming they've been abandoned by spirit or whatever they believe in. So therefore,
mm,
they come down on, I don't believe in it,
mm.
because they're not taking responsibility for their own happiness. You've got to
Sure,
do the
yeah.
leap of faith first, and then everything else will fall into place. But a lot of times people are in such a dark place that
Mm,
they will need people, to help to bring them out of that. But sometimes they're in such a dark place that it's easier for them not to believe, just assume they've been
sure.
abandoned,
Yeah,
and that's always quite a sad place to
yeah.
to be in.
Absolutely. And sometimes all you can do is just be with them in that place and
Yeah.
just have the presence of being with them, whatever they believe. But I do agree with you that there has been quite a polarization um, between people who believe in the spiritual and people who very clearly don't. And I'm almost surprised at how many people who are part of, for example, a Buddhist tradition. And I love Buddhist meditation. I have enormous admiration for Buddhism. But there's quite a strong movement of people within that field who are strongly against the idea of there being spiritual dimensions. You know, it's like Buddhism without religion, Buddhism which is just about calming yourself and being mindful, and not acknowledging what I'm sure you and I believe, is that there is an invisible world all around us in many dimensions, and it's real, and that we don't have to belong to a religion to connect with it, but we want to connect with it, and the more we connect with it, and the more we're in that attunement and that flow, the more we're going to be able to make our lives work, if that's the main thing we're looking for, but also to do the work of those spirits in the other dimensions who are working very hard, most of them, to try to get humanity to change after 5,000 years of war and hierarchy and what's going on in the world now with consumer capitalism. So we need to believe that. And I find it very sad that so many wonderful people, for example, on the left, a lot of people who really want social change, they want justice, they fight for, bringing about the end of climate change and sustainability. It becomes very important for them. And yet if you say something about spirit, they laugh at you. There's a contempt. It's not even always just, oh, do you believe that? Okay, fine. You believe that, I don't. It's kind of, how could you believe that?
Yeah.
Are you so stupid? I thought you were an intelligent woman, Jocelyn. That kind of reaction.
Yeah, it's quite concerning, actually. And I think, there are some wonderful people who do some fantastic work who are part of specific religions.
Yes,
but quite often you'll come across people who use their religion as a battering ram, and I put myself in the category of spiritual, not religious.
Me too.
Yeah. And I think sometimes religion can act as a barrier, and considering we're meant to be in unity consciousness, always remember being, I'm kind of on LinkedIn, and I was talking I was kind of commenting in one of the groups, and I think there was a question. It was something like, how does God help you in your business? People are always bringing religion into any single conversation. You could talk about shopping carts, and somebody would bring religion into it somehow. Anyway, but this was a specific question about God and their business and things. And this I don't know if he's a young guy, but this guy was saying, oh, well, I'm Christian and this is what I do and believe. And then someone else came in and absolutely demolished his belief, said, well, I'm Christian and that's not what Christians believe. You're talking absolute rubbish about this. And then at the very end, he put, God is love. And I thought, well, what was loving? What was loving about that? And I think, people, and I've also, I asked the question about if you woke up one morning and you found that all your beliefs were false, what would you do? And it was quite interesting. It became quite a long conversation, and it was quite interesting because that is really, isn't that what we're meant to do? Aren't we meant to live the present moment without it gives us a freedom if we aren't attached to beliefs which become ego anyway. That my beliefs are more valid than your beliefs.
Yeah.
That's only because I've lived a certain life with a certain family, with certain education, and that's not saying that I'm better or worse than other people. It's just, this is my life path this time. And there's many more people who live in what we in the Western world like to call primitive cultures who are much more tuned in and wise
Definitely.
than I am.
Definitely, absolutely. We need to respect those so much. We've got
Mm.
so much to learn, so much to learn. And I think that in many ways, the concept of progress is a problematic one too, because that's partly why so many people are atheists these days as well, the other side, because they think that science, coming from the Enlightenment period, let's say 17th, 18th century sort of onwards, has enlightened us, and we're much better than people before that because we now have science, and of course we understand a massive amount, and science has done wonderful things, but the idea that we have progressed in every way is so limited, and in many ways we've lost a lot. I mean, I feel very strongly that people in indigenous societies, for example, were far more attuned than we are to the spiritual world, to the invisible world, and that people 5,000 years ago, there was a very big change 5,000 years ago, when hierarchies really took over and the patriarchal religions took over, from a much more goddess orientated kind of religion set of beliefs, and that somehow we now really need to learn from people in the past, but develop something for the future. I don't think just going back to the past or just learning from indigenous peoples is enough. We also need to be creating things for the future, like the groups that are trying out things like Occupy movement or the Arab Spring before it got ruined, in the Kurdish-owned areas of North Syria, as I've been writing about in my blog, the Rojava area, where they're living out kind of non-hierarchical ways of organizing and living. But spirituality needs to catch up with that and be part of all these new movements as well, because many of them are either completely secular and don't believe in any sort of a god, in fact are quite anti the idea of anything spiritual, or they tend to be connected with some religion or another, but are kind of liberal. They're liberal enough within that religion.
I
And
think,
so,
sorry,
go on.
sorry. I think I agree with you about the kind of science and people, especially the kind of lab type things. And I think the problem that a lot of scientists have started is this disconnection. They're disconnected to the land. I think people get so tied up with the science and the enthusiasm about new projects and things that they go further and further along, and then they create something that is of tremendous damage to the people, but they've become disconnected to the beginning of what it was meant to do. And I think we're getting youngsters coming up who are creating some fantastic things to try and take away the damage that's been done, probably from our generation, really. So at least there's awareness. You'll get young people in, just creating electricity for their villages, or there's that guy who's cleaning the oceans. And I saw a wonderful documentary of I can't remember. There's a school that teaches the grandmothers to create solar power for their villages, and they will only teach the grandmothers, because they said if they taught the young men, they would get the knowledge, then leave the village to earn money elsewhere. So they're teaching the grandmothers who've got an interest in staying in the village, and they train other people. And so they have villages now that are all different, lots of different places, not just on one continent, that now have power, because solar power, because they've got the sun. I think it's India and Africa and things. It's just, there's so many great things happening, but you don't hear so much about it. You've got to look on the internet or YouTube to find these videos, they're not really covered in the media, and I think that's a real shame.
No, I think there's a wonderful movement of of people of all ages, really, that's trying to make a big difference and trying to, as you say, go back to what's been damaged, but it's also been damaged by the kind of capitalist consumerist system that we're all also a part of. And so some young people are kind of working in the political sphere, others are working in the technological or scientific sphere. I think what I was talking about was the idea of what I would call scientism, where so long as something can be proved scientifically, then it's real, rather than the way that nowadays, if people talk about the spirit world or talk about their own experiences of the other dimensions, because there isn't a kind of scientific model, if you like, or it hasn't been proved in the lab, it's not believed.
True. Yeah, very true.
That's also a problem today. Yeah.
If you can't see it, it doesn't exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what got you into, I mean, why do you do your work? What was the start of your journey with Equalia and all these things? What kind of, what was the prime motivation for it?
Well, I think the feeling to begin with, my journey started. I grew up in Africa, and I was very connected to the spiritual world in the villages where I grew up. And so I've always had that sort of feeling that there is another reality. But I've also been very aware from an early age of inequalities. I grew up in colonial Africa as a white person in a black school. I was very conscious at the time of independence in Ghana, the importance of overthrowing the colonial rule. And later on, I got very involved in the feminist movement, both in this country. So I started off being kind of, in a way, more political. The spiritual was something a bit separate. And gradually, I brought the two together. First of all, through feminism, I felt that just materialist feminism, meaning economic and political feminism, wasn't going to work without the spiritual side. So I got very interested in the goddess work and have run many courses and written many books on goddess work over 20 odd years, if not more, and have been part of, I suppose, a wider pagan movement as well, which goes back to the land and honors the rhythms and cycles of the seasons and the land. And is very connected to different spiritual beings, some of them ancient beings, some of them beings of the land that we're on now. But a point came when it felt like it was too totally focused on the feminine and the female, which I think was natural because that's where the balance needs to be made after 5,000 years of patriarchy. But I then began to, I mean, I've always been a socialist in the sense of feeling we should distribute our wealth far, far more evenly. And gradually, we've become so much more unequal. As the years go by, inequalities increased and increased. And it seemed to me that the political projects of socialism and anarchism and social democracy weren't making inequality any less. That if you're going to actually do something about global capitalism, about consumerism, and all these things, there's got to be a spiritual dimension, which is missing at the moment. And so my mission is now to try to sow the seeds, just little seeds, to develop a very specific, what I'm calling a left-wing spirituality, which is Equalia, because I wasn't seeing it anywhere. I searched. There have been some amazing people, for example, in the States, a marvelous rabbi, who's been doing spirit matters for many, many years in California. And there are people here and there. Of course, the Quakers are very well known for being politically active and spiritual. But I'm interested in something very specific, which is where Equalia came from. So I was meditating about 2 years ago at home, just as I usually do, with my candle and my incense, and getting into an altered state. And suddenly this word came through to me, Equalia, Equalia. And I thought, aha, this is it for now. And so I did what everybody does when I imagine nowadays, I Googled it. So the first thing I did, where did that word come from? And the only thing I could find was in The Simpsons. There's an imaginary utopian island called Equalia that Lisa Simpson and Juliet, her friend, have created, in which all the citizens are equal, but Juliet and Lisa are in charge. I thought it was quite funny. That sort of reminds me, of George Orwell's, Animal Farm.
That one came to my mind as well. Everyone's equal, but some are more equal than others.
Yes, exactly. So, I've got to keep a sense of humour about this, because obviously equality is such a big project. It's so difficult. I know myself in my ordinary everyday life. I'm finding it so difficult. I try to kind of treat people as equal, and then, as we were saying earlier, sometimes they're going to look up to me too much, or look down on me too much, or compete with me, in this terrible competition that our society seems to be worshipping. You turn on the telly, which I do probably rather too often, but never mind that. And there's always these shows about people winning or losing points. It's almost like this is the religion of today. And the sports world, of course, is all about winning and losing. And Equalia is the complete opposite of all of that. So my mission right now is to sow the seeds of this very specific spirituality, which is specifically left wing in the sense of, you could call it socialist or anarchist, or you don't have to label it at all, but believe that more equality in the world is essential for humanity to survive. Quite literally. I don't think we'll survive without it.
No, I totally agree with you, and I think there's more annoyance, and actually annoyance isn't strong enough. It's outrage at the corruption of a lot of the political systems that are in place now. You're seeing people just not voting because they think, well, what's the point? You're one person's as corrupt as the other, and I think it's really coming to a head now. And you see an awful lot of people creating their own systems within their own villages and their own towns because they don't believe that any politician has got anything else in their minds except their own personal gain. And it kind of, what gets me is when politicians seem, a lot of them, when you hear, and I'm not a political being, I'm really, I think we all have to be up to a point, I suppose, just to be living on the planet, but politics don't really interest me. But when there's so much about alternative energy, the wind farms, and and all this sort of thing, and there's so much written about the damage that can be done from other things, and then it's like you'll get politicians talking as though they've never heard of these things, but they're not, and that's what it's like. Again, my bandwagon is about people having choices. And a lot of times people don't realize they've got choices, they're only given one option, and it's really about letting people know there's other things out there, and they should be tried. Not just,
another world is possible.
Yeah, but it's all down to profit. It's all down to money, and you can't eat money.
No, exactly.
It's a bit crazy. So what are the challenges that, I know we've touched on quite a few, but what are the specific challenges that you face with the work you do?
We probably have touched on them. I think one of them is the fact that so many people are anti the spiritual, and a lot of political people just don't want the spiritual dimension there. They want to keep it separate, or they are kind of contemptuous, I suppose. So that's kind of quite difficult to get it into the political world. And when I say political, obviously, in my case, I'm talking about progressive left-wing politics. But there's also, of course, the other way round, is that a lot of people in the spiritual worlds are not at all interested in politics as such. I think a lot of people have a feeling inside them that there's too much about profit. And in a way, I think public opinion is changing. Just look at the reaction. Even only yesterday was it the shareholders refused to pay the CEO of BP what he, the millions he was asking for. I think a lot of ordinary people are beginning to have their consciousness raised, and it doesn't necessarily mean being part of a political party. Obviously, lots of people will join the Green Party who are kind of spiritually minded, or maybe even Labour these days. But a lot of people would rather maybe have a direct action. I mean, I went on the climate change protest a few months ago, absolutely packed with a lot of young people, and some of whom were Buddhists, some of whom were involved in one kind of spiritual path or another. And then you've also got people who are, I know how to put this, don't like idealism. A lot of the people, young people included, have become very cynical over the years. And when you come out with a kind of utopian idealism, as I often do, I'm kind of looked at as a sort of Pollyanna-ish, rather mad person, because I still believe in the human spirit. I do believe that in the end, capitalism will have to change, and we can't go on like this at this rate with this degree of profit, more profit, more profit, more profit. It can't, it's not sustainable. The planet won't sustain it. Human beings won't sustain it. It's making us unhappy, apart from anything else. If all one is interested in is just happiness, then this kind of hierarchical, endlessly climbing the ladder to be more successful and more powerful and more famous and more rich is all that we have in our lives, rather than the idea of balancing all the opposites that our souls came with, balance the opposites of masculine and feminine, of being warm and being cool, being detached and being passionate, being able to rise and fall, be a leader and be a follower. We need to be able to move between all these. And I think it's quite hopeful, the flexibility in some young people's sexual orientation is like, I can be feminine one day and masculine the next. So there's a lot happening kind of under the surface around changing the paradigm from a hierarchical profit-making, forever, ever more and more and more, bigger, bigger, bigger. You only have to look at the City of London, the skyline of the City of London, to see that in practice. To much small scale, that like the transition movement's been fantastic. People working in their communities, people being able to feel equal without having to be always competing endlessly with everyone.
I saw quite a good post came up on Facebook yesterday, and it was said, at your funeral, nobody's going to be saying she had a really expensive couch and some wonderful food.
Oh, lovely! Exactly. That sums it up beautifully. That's really lovely. Yes. So it's changing. I think the trouble is, of course, is that the other side, like the big corporations and the warmongers and the arms dealers, are also getting stronger and stronger. And it's almost as if I feel like there's the old ways for the 5,000 years are hanging on for dear life, because they know that something is shifting and that many, many people throughout the world are changing their perspectives.
Yeah.
And if we were to be really spiritually attuned, we wouldn't care about material possessions or even expensive holidays nearly as much. And the whole capitalist system would fall apart. Because a bit idealistic, but
Yeah, no, but we'd be where we were meant to be, meeting the people we were meant to meet.
Yes.
And if you needed to be in Brussels one day and then fly off to Goa, you'd go by your internal clock.
Being in the flow, you be in your own flow. And it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that people wouldn't still, I guess, have trade. I mean, trade in itself, there's nothing wrong with, possessions. Human beings have always passed on stone axes in exchange for skins or something like that. And that people would maybe want to travel, but maybe they wouldn't go to Brussels by plane. Maybe they would go by train instead. I mean, choices can be made which are towards sustainability rather than.
It's interesting. We talking about travel, and some years ago, I remember I was invited to meet some friends, American friends in Vegas, and well, one was my friend, and she was with a group of people. It's a singing event, and do you know, it just wouldn't come together. And at that time, I was working, and it was going to be my holiday entitlement ended at a certain period, and then it was just a few days after that, so I'd have had to take out the next year's holiday, and it was just so many complications. And I had friends that were coming to go and visit me from San Francisco. They were going to drive to Vegas just to catch up with me and everything. This didn't come together, and then my friend said, well, why don't you just come to us in San Francisco? I went there and I had the most wonderful time. And that was where I was meant to be.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point, isn't it? When we're really attuned, when we're in the flow, we go where we're meant to be, and we just know it, and it happens.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
people try and push the river too much. They try and force it. So what are the joys you get from your work, Jocelyn?
Well, it's a sort of a permanent joy of being in when I'm in touch with Equalia, and when I'm attuned, I feel very, very blessed and very, very lucky to be alive, grateful, I guess, very grateful just to be here and to be breathing and to be in her flow. But of course, there are also joys that are to do with possibly my ego. When people read my book, somebody read my book the other day and they said, oh, that reminds us of Murray Bookchin, who's written about social ecology that's being used in northern Syria by the Kurdish cantons. And I felt so delighted that, my heart filled with gratitude for somebody getting, when they get the ideas and they can see that the whole idea of being non-hierarchical is not an easy one, and that my book brings in the psychological side. And so when people kind of get me, get where I'm at, I must admit I do feel very pleased. But then I try very hard to not be so over flattered that when people don't, that I'm not too brought down by it. There's that thing about praise and blame that the Sufis used to do, to be able to hold both again, the balance, to enjoy the praise, not to deny it, but when people do the opposite, which happens a lot, I'm sure to you as well, not to let that flatten you either, but to sort of keep some kind of balance between the two. So I'm really still learning that, because of course the ego still pops up and says, oh, why don't more people read my book, or something like that? And people look on Amazon or wherever it might be, how many hits have you had, and it's all about numbers, where of course quality is actually the most important thing. And it's very easy to get caught up in this sort of win or lose culture, where you sort of want to have vast numbers of people at your doorstep, begging to hear your words of wisdom. But
I can just see that we'll have to get off the interview very quickly, because I'm sure there's a line.
That's what? Oh, the line of people, yes. Or knocking. Can you hear them?
To ring your bell.
Exactly. Oh dear. Oh yes.
I'd like. Would you like to show us your paintings?
I would love to.
Right. I know you're on your phone, which will make it easier. But remember, you need to be speaking, or else at
the same time.
Me. Yes.
Of course. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you around to just look at one or two of the pictures. Here we are at the rebirth of Equalia. Can you see that?
Yes.
She's got a great big egg in her tummy.
Bring it back a bit. Because it's too zoomed in. We can't see the whole.
Oh, you can't see the whole thing. Is
that
about right?
That's good.
So there's Equalia. Oh, that gives me an idea of the distance. There is Equalia. It's a recent painting. and it's meant to be of all the different dimensions, a bit like the cover of my book, which are all spiraling. Everything in nature is winding and spiraling, and we are trying to give birth to a new spirituality that flows with these forces in nature. So that's one. I'm now going to move you on, hopefully successfully, to another picture.
Yes, that's good.
That started off being Atagatis, who is the ancient goddess of northern Syria, who laid her egg in the Euphrates River, and I was bringing her back to help the people of northern Syria against the many forces of hatred and the war that's going on there. And again, she's got this egg, which is there to give birth to the new. So I'm very interested in the new.
I really like that one.
Oh, thank you very much. There's quite a few more. This is up here. We've got a picture of Dionysus. For a long time, can you see that all right?
Yes, that's good.
For a long time, I was a priestess of Dionysus. And you can imagine that it involved lots of grapes and wine. But this is the mysteries of Dionysus, where there's a picture like this in the Red Room in Pompeii, where Ariadne is the great goddess that Dionysus is learning from. I'll just show you a couple more as I walk around. Let me keep talking. Can you see that one?
Yes.
That is, this is again a kind of a bird, a green goddess who is both earthed in all those spirals and also in the spirit world out there at the same time. It's trying to combine spirit and matter as much as possible.
To me, it looks like, it looks very much like nature, and kind of embracing.
Yes. Lovely. So those are just 4 examples of my work. This is my room. You can probably get a feeling of the whole room as I walk around my
I love the
fireplace.
vibrant colours you use.
And now I'm going to come back to us.
Yeah, I was saying to Jocelyn earlier, I love her red walls because I have them as well.
So here I am, and that's been really interesting.
It's been delightful talking to you. Jocelyn is actually an author on Soulfully Connecting, so if you want to read some of her articles, you can find her there, and that's on www.soulfully-connecting.com. But Jocelyn, if people want to contact you direct, could you give your contact details, please?
Absolutely. My email, I'm happy to give my email to people, is jochaplin, all one word, JOCHAPLIN, @yahoo.com. That's my email. And I also have a website, which is www.serpentinstitute.com.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. And if Jocelyn, if you send me the link to your book, then what I'll do is I'll attach it to the the video.
That's great.
Yeah, but we can also put it onto the bottom of your articles as well on the website.
Lovely.
So if people are interested. But that's Deep Equality. Yeah.
Deep Equality, and it's on Amazon. It's O-Books, and it's 2008. Okay, lovely.
Jocelyn, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real education, and I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, me too. I really feel connected to you.
Lovely.
It's only through this method.
It's mutual. Okay, well, from myself and from Jocelyn, I wish you a very good day, and I will see you again soon. Bye.